Hey guys, it's Briars. Just want to tell you what's going on down at Meltdown Comics in Hollywood. We got Meltthology. Meltthology is a monthly comics jam at Meltdown every third Tuesday of the month. Here's how it works. Show up at the Melt at 7 p.m. and draw a page of whatever you want. At 9:30 p.m., we'll collect all of the art and $3 for printing costs. When you come to the next month's comics jam, you'll get a zine with everyone's contributions inside. There is no set theme, and all skill levels are welcome. Last but not least, Meltthology contributors get 10% off their Meltdown purchase on the night of the event. Go to @Meltthology on Twitter or Facebook if you have any specific questions. Ask for Chuck, and that is @Melt_thology.
Welcome back to Pod Sequentialism, brought to you by Meltdown Comics and Collectibles and the Pop Sequentialism website and blog. My name is Matt Kennedy. I am your host. And today, as always, there are fun things going on, which you may hear in the background. We've got the Nerd Melt University, and we've got the improv class. So if you hear some excitement, it might be some of that. But hopefully all the excitement's right here in this room. I've got with me a great guest, Ave Rose, who is a fine artist I've worked with at Lovelace Jesus Gallery, but who many of you may know now from the television series that she's just come off of, and I'm going to let her talk about that. Ave, welcome to the show.
Hi. Yeah, it's just strange. It's a strange world because I was just on a reality show called Steampunk'd on the Game Show Network. Mm-hmm. And it's you can never prepare yourself for that kind of. You go in thinking, this is going to be funny. I'm going to be on a reality show and I'm going to make fun of it the whole time, or I'm going to roll with the punches. And once you're in it, you really are a lab rat stuck in a maze at the mercy of all the scientists who are poking at you to make you do the things that are going to entertain the world.
Well, at least you started with a great history in not only in steampunk, and anybody who is unfamiliar with Ave's artwork, I want to send you to a website. I want you to say it right now. Your website.
My art website is www.averoseart.com.
Which is AVEROSEART. And incredible work. I've been a fan for years. We've been showing your work for years.
Thank you.
But Ave is also one of these incredibly versatile people who has done a lot of really exciting things, and it's because you've had so much experience in delving into a lot of different disciplines. You have fan bases that may not even know each other.
Yeah, that's so true. It's strange. I'm a singer, and the people who know I sing don't know that I model, and the people who know I model don't know that I breakdance, and the people who know I breakdance don't know that I was a publisher,
right,
or am a publisher.
And that's why we're having you on today. I mean, any one of these would be ample enough reason to have you as a guest. But I wanted to talk about independent publishing. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we focus on in Pod Sequentialism is touching into informational areas that I think are a real mystery to people who want to be doing comics, or maybe are huge fans of the comic book industry but don't know the process. And it occurred to me, you've been an independent publisher for 10 years now.
Yeah, it's crazy. I realized it, it's 2015, and so I started in 2005. Mm-hmm. It's hard to believe that time goes by in the blink of an eye, but at the same time, so much happens. So there's been so many changes. Mm-hmm. So,
I mean, when you started, there certainly weren't things like Kickstarter. There certainly weren't as many, cross-cultural funding platforms.
Oh, no. You either have to have saved up or get a loan from the bank. It was unheard of to ask people for money to fund something that you're going to do. And I'm still kind of, I guess, a little old-fashioned about that.
Yeah, it's still wrapping your head around that.
Just because I had to do it the hard way, so maybe I'm just a little jealous for people who are handed, selling things that they haven't even made yet.
Yeah, no, and that's definitely a concern. And I've definitely addressed this on this podcast many times before, and one thing that I thought was interesting is that when Christopher Ulrich kickstarted his exhibition back in 2010,
I didn't even know he did that.
He was the first artist to kickstart an exhibition.
Wow.
And he gave away some really great stuff. I mean, it really wasn't even what you would classically think of as a kickstart now.
Wow.
Because he was giving away paintings for like
oh my gosh,
less than $1,000, and these were like $10,000.
If only I could go back in time.
I know.
Wow.
But he was hated on. Like the rain of hatred that came down on him for doing this, and he barely made his goal.
Wow.
And I can tell you from absolute fact that he did not profit from this. That
he is a hard worker. He is the most hard-working artist I've ever met.
Yeah. And it was, the situation where he found himself working for 2 years to put together a show, realized that he needed the materials. He didn't have the money to even start the show, that if he had to go through conventional means, that the show would never have happened. And man, that would have been unfortunate because that show was incredible.
Right.
But Kickstart has presented an opportunity for people's voices to be heard when they would not otherwise have been heard, just as things like Pro Tools have made it easier for people to record music than ever before. And it occurs to me, and I think you're going to be agreeing with me on this point, that means that there's a lot of people that maybe shouldn't be doing it that have.
Right.
And that the ease of, or the low risk factor means that, well, now you've got corporations saying, hey, why don't you kickstart this sequel to The Love Bug? And it's like, come on, are you kidding me? I mean, you're a big Hollywood studio and you want us to pay everything. And I can see the frustration of that, absolutely. But talk to me about what it was like back in 2005.
Well, there was such a different feel because I went into self-publishing, but I did my research. I did years of research. I got out of UCLA in 2003, and it wasn't until 2005 where, I was ready to start the publishing company. And what I realized at the time was that people did not like self-made things. Like now it's the opposite. They like it if you're one person doing everything. They like that if you made it homemade. Where back then, it was the opposite. They didn't trust it. They wanted it to be, they didn't want to buy anything unless it was from a major company or unless they heard of you.
Right.
And so it was funny because I had spent all this time making myself look, what they say, fake it until you make it.
Yeah.
I made myself look like the fanciest publishing company. I worked my butt off and made these beautiful hardcover, full, color illustrated books and kept saying when I promoted something like, we did this, we did that. And, by the time I had a couple of books out and I was going to these small, comic book shops, they didn't know where to put me because I wasn't big enough to be put in the big section. And my books didn't look like they were actually self-published.
Right.
It was the strangest. Yeah, it didn't look independent. It was the strangest thing. And it went from people going, oh, I want to get your book because it's so well made. You must be a big company to, you're a big company, so did you make this? Did you write this yourself? It was such a weird switch, and I had spent all my time working on a different model.
I remember I think it was 1984, and I'd read an article in probably, it had to have been Psychotronic Film or Video Guide, about Russ Meyer. And I had been kind of tangentially familiar with his work and saw an ad or I saw like the backside of one of the videotapes and it had a phone number on it.
Whoa.
And I was like, wow. And with like the price of the video on it, this is back when videotapes were like $80 a piece,
wow.
Like before they went sell through. And I called this number and Russ Meyer answered his phone.
No.
And I remember being like delighted.
That's amazing.
And I remember thinking, wow, I mean, that must be why they don't put the phone number on the back of Warner Brothers, because the president of Warner Brothers doesn't want to answer his phone. Like, being a 13-year-old kid, I had no idea, that there was such infrastructure. Like, it sort of simplified entertainment for me in a way. And I think that was really helpful in allowing me to make a decision to move from Massachusetts to Los Angeles.
Wow.
Being like, wow, it's gotta be easy. Which is the absolute opposite lesson that anybody can really take. But but what I think is also true, you talk about doing all those things to give that, the fake it until you make it, and I love this, we're going to use this all throughout the whole program, is that you create this illusion of success to create the success. And when after I'd been at Blue Underground for a while and branched off to form Panic House, and everybody that was at this company, it was kind of like the Beatles. They all left and became even more successful than they had been at this shop. And my friend Joyce helped to start up a company called No Shame Films. And we were all looking at office space, and we all kind of wanted to have office space next to each other, thinking, well, hey, we could keep costs down. We could have like one secretary that answered the phone for all of us, type of thing.
What a dream, though, right?
I know. It's like, talk about a co-op. But what we did when we were looking for a space, and Joyce called this to my attention, there was this great large space on like Las Palmas. And she ended up getting this office actually 2 blocks from where we're recording right now at Meltdown.
Oh, wow.
When she was there on Sunset. And I said, Joyce, how come you took the smaller office on Sunset? And she said, because when we go to the video fairs, everybody knows Sunset Boulevard. And they're going to think that you're a real player because they know that all the real players are on Sunset Boulevard. And I was like, wow, I'd never thought about that. And so I got an office down the street from hers.
Right. That's the funny thing, too, because at the time when I started my publishing company, I lived in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And that was a big deal that I actually could say that it was published in Hollywood.
Yeah.
It was such an interesting thing,
Yeah. Yeah. So the TV shows recorded, the sitcoms, in the 70s, recorded live in Hollywood, California, even if it was Burbank, probably.
Right.
But so you come out of UCLA. And you basically scrape together enough money to kind of make this a real thing.
Yeah.
And it couldn't have been easy.
It was so hard. I went to UCLA for English literature and with a concentration in creative writing. And what they taught us as in the creative writing classes, which was like super, what is the word where it's very selective. They only had 15 people, or hundreds would apply, 15 people per class. And they're teaching you the real world of publishing. And what I learned about the real world of publishing, that it was complete BS. I hated it. It sounded like the worst hierarchy ever. You've got to spend a good 2 years of your life to write a novel and make sure it's really good. And then you got to find an agent, and then you got to find a publisher. But once you get that publisher who's going to pay you pennies, he has this contract where he can do whatever he wants with that book of yours that you spent 2 years of your life to read. And he can decide to shelve it because some other book with a better known author decides to come up with the same similar book or similar title. Or it's just insane because if you don't have this publisher backing you up, nobody's going to want to read a huge novel by you. But what we learned about the beginning of literature, which was back in the day, they had short stories just put into the little magazines as almost like these little cliffhangers.
Yeah.
And so I thought, why don't we still have that same format where we give a little taste of an author, and then you can decide if you like them and read more. But it's so bizarre. It's like, you have these authors who write these amazing, huge novels, and they go, oh, and now here's my short stories book.
Yeah.
And because they already have this huge following. Like, why is it so backwards?
And an even thicker collection of rejection slips from all of these magazines. Yeah.
Yeah, it's insane. So I decided, and I started realizing very quickly while I was at UCLA, people just really don't want to read anymore. And I was always very interested in art. And so I decided when I was going to do my publishing company that it would be illustrated short stories and not comic books, but with that same flair as a comic book, because I loved comic books, but I'd hate to admit this because I know a lot of people are going to shake their heads when they hear this, but what drew me into comic books was that very front page, the cover page. And maybe I just didn't have a big enough imagination, but I'd go and buy all these comics based on the cover page and then turn the pages and go, oh, it was only the one page that had all that.
Everybody who ever bought a Gold Key comic, it's like Magnus Robot Fighter had these beautiful painted covers and then just like a 9-panel box on every single page throughout the entire thing.
It's such a teaser.
All that stuff. And I remember, in the 70s, we'd go with my mom to the, one of the, it's not the same department store chains, and I think the ones that we were going to then probably aren't even still in business, but I remember Rich's and I remember Caldor's and they'd be like these poly-bagged sets of comics, and this was not something that the publishers did because there was 10 different publishers sometimes in these, and you'd be like $1 and it would be like 10 comics, even when comics are 20 cents, it was like, well, that was a damn good deal. That's
Right.
2 for 1. And there'd be like one Spider-Man comic on the outside and one Batman comic on the back outside. And in between was all Gold Key and Charlton and like Harvey and Archie and stuff that, no kid above the age of 6 wanted to read probably.
Yeah, it's this weird, and that's what I set out to do. I thought, I'm going to make the book that I want to, that's going to be flashy enough to get people, kind of trick people into reading literature.
Yeah.
It's like, I know you think you want to watch TV, but look, this is very eye-catching, kind of like TV, except they'll make you think.
Yeah.
So I set out to make these illustrated short stories that would have the same illustrations as the beautiful covers of the comics that I saw, but in story form, form and not in comic form.
And our last show, we had Satine Phoenix on as a guest.
Oh, yeah, I love her.
And she's self-publishing her book, New Praetorians. And we talked about, the challenges of being, a woman in the comic book industry. But we also talked about how I thought it was great that around the time that you're talking about, and actually probably after when you first started doing this, so I'm thinking that maybe when I started going back to Comic-Con after a slight absence, I started to notice that artists would do the kind of fantasy art collection that wasn't sequential, but it was formatted like a comic book. And, you were kind of ahead of your time. And it was sort of what helped, I think, get that science fiction and fantasy genre fan base into that type of art. But to have that as a format, and Satine agreed, she was like, yeah, we really wish there was more of that now, and we're hoping that it's coming back around to it, because page count has been so limited, that the average comic book now is 22 pages.
Right.
So it's really not enough to tell a story, but you still have to hit your, just like when you'd submit a spec script for a sitcom, it's like page 2 has to have an event, page 12 has to have an event, you know where your commercial breaks are going to be. Granted, it's a slightly different format, but it's format nonetheless. Right. And so you're kind of unshackled by those rules by being an independent publisher.
And the interesting thing was, in the beginning, people didn't know what to think about it. And it was kind of funny because I was showing at the Comic-Con, the Alternative Press Expo, WonderCon, and in the beginning, people would pick these up and think the opposite. They'd go, oh, this is a beautiful cover. This is a comic. And they'd open it up and go, see the beautiful images, but at the same time kind of be a little bit daunted by how...
Do I have to read this?
Yeah, this is like a full paragraph all on one page. And it was so strange. I even got people who would look at the artwork and go, this is so amazing. This is the most beautiful artwork I've ever seen, and I love the idea of the story. And this book, whole entire book, 30-page book is like, $8. That's amazing. Can I get a print of one of the images? And I'm like, really? You can get the whole book, and the book's like almost as big as the print. They're like, yeah, but I want to put it on my wall. And it's like, oh, and I paid $20 for the print. It's like, really? Really? It was so crazy. I even started trying to trick people into thinking it was a whole movie thing. When I was doing the Comic-Con in the beginning, so I started at the Comic-Con in 2006. I started getting attention by dressing up. I did, speaking about being the woman, I noticed that the booths that were getting the most attention had booth babes. Yep. I didn't want to be seen as a booth babe because I was the publisher, but I didn't mind that idea. So I took my two hot sisters, Rani and Ranila, and mind you, we all look like triplets or 2 years apart. And I put them in like bikinis. This is before they said no bikinis at the Comic-Con. Yeah. I put them in bikinis with the satchel that said inkpenmutations.com, my publishing company, across their boobs and on miniskirts on their butts. So when people took pictures of their butts and their boobs, they would see my publishing company.
Free advertising. It's like bumper stickers.
It was so funny. So I started getting people to come over and check the books out that way. And then I started turning the books, instead of making, just having a normal trailer, I made book trailers that were animated trailers using all the illustrations. And I put it on a big flat screen, and people would go by and go, oh my gosh, is this a new animated series? And I try to tell them the story before I'd let them down with the idea that it's a book that they have to read. Right. And it's just so weird how many loops are that you have to get people to jump through, or hoops, I mean, to get them to actually like the idea of reading something. Yeah. It is bizarre.
And it's funny, we're talking with Satine that outside of just the comics, they're also planning on doing full-length books, to help feed the fan base into this kind of collection of multimedia.
Right.
And with you starting out with these illustrated books with illustrations in every page, which is interesting because it's kind of the format of your classic children's book.
Right,
And of course,
exactly.
they're not children's books.
No, they're not.
I've read a few of these. And it's pretty powerful, affecting, actually, and emotional stuff. And a prior show that we had done was how marginalized the female readership has been by mainstream comics. And that even when it's a female artist and sometimes a female writer, that the stories still tend to be aimed at adolescent boys. And I think that that's something no one can accuse you of.
Right.
That the stories that you were writing were extremely personal, really raw in the amount of truth that they're revealing. And even if it's in a gothic romance setting, or if it's a kind of strict reality base, the stories themselves do touch on things that I think every woman who would be able to pick up that story and read it would say, okay, that's true. That's not somebody, that's kind of making up a bunch of junk. This has happened to me. And oh my God, this is happening. Where at the, it's 18 pages in, it's kind of like there's somebody else out there that understands what I've been through. And I really want you to kick out a few of the early titles that you put out, but also some of the recent ones, so that people can kind of look into this and pick them up. And I invite you to do that now.
Okay. Well, the very first book that we published was called Mothers Earn Memoir Dust, and it was actually written by a woman. Her name is Calamity J. And it was amazing because it was based on her life story. Her mother, left her when she was her and her little brother, and she was in foster home. And at one point, just a quick little story, her foster sister was like, "Hey, your mom's at the gas station cleaning windows on cars for dollars." And she thought that they were making fun of her like they always did. And she went over there, and sure enough, it was her mother, homeless, asking, and didn't even recognize her own daughter. So this book it's beautiful because it's illustrated by this artist who did this beautiful, psychedelic almost imagery. And we wanted the book to feel like you were paging through somebody's memories.
Right.
And so it's like it's separated into different stories that are written either in poetry form or spoken word form. Like, it's amazing, and everyone who's ever read it feels like they want to give Calamity J a hug, and they feel like they've been with her on this journey. And that's what I wanted all my books to be about, are these journeys.
Yeah, they're very experiential.
Yes.
And I think that the different texture of the storytelling mechanic and the way that it changes is important to remain true to the type of story that's being told. And it had to have seemed like it came out of left field to most people who had picked it up. And some people might have been like, what is this?
Right, yeah. It took, and it's funny too, because people just get set in their ways.
Yep.
And it's funny when you can tell somebody likes something, even when they're saying they don't. They'll pick it up, their eyes are lit up, and they're sitting there listening to me talk, asking me more questions. And then they're almost about to walk away before buying it because they're like, I don't know about this. And I say, I just say, hey, why don't you just give it a try and take the book? I used to always say that. Why don't you just take the book? And they would go, no, I'll pay for it.
Yeah.
That's how you know somebody actually really wanted it, and they were just stuck in their own boundaries in their head.
Radiohead would agree. They put out their free record. It was like, hey, if you like this, make a donation, but the music's free. Now that's years after you're having the kind of same idea at the convention table. The one of the other titles that you put out after that what was the first title that you wrote?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's funny. There's a secret. I'll reveal it here the very first time ever. But I actually wrote under a pen name, the first one. And it was the pen name was Winter.
Oh, okay.
And it was tongue-in-cheek, and that was called Zombie Cadence, and that's a zombie story.
Okay. Breaking news here. Breaking news on Pod Sequentialism.
The reason why it's so crazy is because I really wanted, it was so tongue-in-cheek and not my personal style of writing, that I wanted to make sure I separated that for something that I would write that I thought would be more serious. Mm-hmm. And so I created this character, created her whole bio, and actually had a photo shoot done of me wearing a mask. And then when I did Fangoria, the Fangoria convention, the horror convention, to sell this book. I had my little sister dress up in that mask to sign the book for me. And it was so funny because no one had heard of my company, no one had heard of my book, but there was a line there was like a line of 30 people waiting to get the book signed because they're so mesmerized by my sister. And they thought she was so powerful, but what they didn't realize is that she was so terrified of people that in real life, she won't even talk to you. People have often thought that she was deaf. So having this mask on and refusing to talk, which is what I would have hired somebody to do anyways, that was just her. And people can sense there's something off about her. So they just wanted to know this person who wasn't even the person who wrote the book.
Right. That's kind of a great marketing technique. And a lot of people who have seen you at conventions, I mean, you talked about the fact that you dress up and wear different costumes, but you're kind of famous for that.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's not just like, oh yeah, you know, Comic-Con's coming around. I think I'll put on this outfit.
It's a huge ordeal. Yeah, and for many years I actually wore these platforms that made me 7 feet tall.
Yeah.
And it was crazy because I'd actually come back going, maybe I shouldn't dress up. Maybe it's distracting, and try it out for like a day. And it was even more distracting not having the costume on because people wouldn't even want to pay attention. They would say, "Where's your costume? What happened? Are you okay?" They thought something bad had happened.
Yeah.
And so I thought,
did you fall off those platforms?
Yeah. Did you twist your ankle? Now you can't wear the giant shoes. But no, I have to stay in costume and I have to bring people in. And it's like we said, people have these barriers. When you go into the Comic-Con, it's over stimulus everywhere. Yeah. And so you have to do anything you can to say, come here. And I know people go, well, I want my work to speak for itself. I don't want to dress up. But hey, good luck, buddy, because I'll do whatever it takes to get somebody to come to my booth. I'll do a backflip if I had the power to.
and that's an important thing. And I think that that a lot of people, you know, they assume they get the money, they get the project out there, and then they really have absolutely no idea how to market it. And honestly, having worked as a marketing director at several motion picture companies, I can tell you that a lot of people that had my position had absolutely no idea how to market things either. And these are the people that are getting paid a lot of money to do it.
I read book after marketing versus advertising, promoting versus, you know.
But it's kind of like self-help. It's like there's a lot of books out there, and are they really helping anybody? Because the second that book gets published, the metric changes.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Now more than ever.
What happened to me.
Right. But the good thing about your particular experience and something that you've become well known for in many different areas, and the fact that they all do tie back into promoting back to you, is that the costumes led to a kind of performance art.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, your costume and the degree of detail and just, I guess, ephemera connected to it resulted in another 2 books. Those 2 books resulted in short films.
Right.
One of the short films also helped your brother-in-law, who was on a different reality show because of the costumes.
Sig Neutron.
You know, Sig's amazing costumes. The stuff that Triops is building with you and the costumes that you guys do. You have I don't want to say, but there's the second identity that you guys have together, which is building up its own momentum and its own thing. And all of these things, when they work in Congress, absolutely help. The reason that we have the word zeitgeist is that it is, you know, something that appears within the overall consciousness. These things don't happen by accident. There was a television series where they had the same teams of people take the same route to work and then ask them to work on a project, marketing teams, and they all produced almost exactly the same thing because they had put little subliminal messages on the way to work in the city on the way there, and it was unavoidable.
That's crazy.
You've been doing has been planting these very different little seeds in a lot of different types of I mean, not even just genres, but I mean, it's like completely different areas of consciousness where you've got the publishing company, you've got the opera.
Thank you.
You know, the singing and then there's the whole Gothic community thing, and then your work as a model. I mean, you've had numerous images of you published in Karen Sau's books.
Magazines.
In magazines. In there's fashion stuff, there's fetish stuff, there's just straight up fine art photography stuff,
cosplay calendars.
And then your sculptural work has appeared in High Fructose.
Yep.
It's been on the Juxtaposed blogs.
Dark Beauty magazine. Is it Dark Beauty?
Gothic Beauty.
Yeah, Gothic Beauty.
Yep. And Blue Blood, and then there's been and then the costume stuff, which is huge. And when you've got people that are on the boards of Mocha and LACMA, and they're hiring you to do your performance thing at their seasonal parties, I mean, this is about as close as you can get to what the aesthetic of the Andy Warhol factory was. Only it's all you.
Thank you.
It's like you and your immediate extended family.
The best response I ever had, where there was a point where was at the Comic-Con and I didn't know what to promote. I was so confused, and I kind of wandered around almost in these giant costumes, aimlessly, never being at my booth, as I felt lost.
Yeah.
Until a fan, he ran over and he was like, "I've been looking for you everywhere and I want to buy a book." And I said, "Well, I didn't even bring any books this year. I brought all my art." And he says, "Well, that's great because people I've been seeing your booth, everyone's buying up your art." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm almost selling out." He's like, "Why are you so upset?" And I'm like, "I don't really know what I am. I don't really know what I'm supposed to concentrate on." And the weirdest thing is that we're at the Comic-Con, but nobody buys books at the Comic-Con anymore.
Yeah.
And he said, "What do you think?" He's like, "What? Why are you so confused? I know exactly what you are. You're a storyteller. These are all venues of how you tell a story."
Yeah.
He's like, "Don't define yourself by saying I'm a singer, I'm a dancer, I'm a writer, He's like, "You're a storyteller, and whatever you do, you're telling a story." And I was like, "Wow, that blew my mind." Because but I've been trying to do this whole time, and I didn't even realize that's what I was doing.
But you're also always a walking billboard for everything that you do.
Yes.
And not in a completely out there, like Angeline kind of way. Let's get in trouble with Angeline, because I try and do that on every single show that I do. I was in the Rackman program, and I think there was one time when her manager called 3 times because we kept talking about her. Since this isn't live, we don't have to worry about that.
That's hilarious.
But even in a way, I guess you kind of have to give it up to her in that she's always been this exact same thing, but she doesn't have anything to market except the idea of what her idea of fame is. Whereas every instance of you branching out into new territory constantly announces that there's more to you than that last project, but that last project has validity.
Right.
And so when you look at something like the Aliens in LA, which is a picture book, high concept project,
right,
art photography, costuming, just a
guerrilla photography,
impossible to describe in a lot of ways.
Right. Aliens in LA was this amazing project with artist Triops Trefid, and he created these amazing artistic costumes that were made for street performance, and it was all done with the lighting just from the costumes and the lighting just from the background on the streets of LA, kind of guerrilla style photography.
And a lot at night.
Yes, and at night, interacting with people who had no idea what was going on, and it was such a great idea. And initially, he was just doing it just for the sake of art. No one was really recording what was happening, and then he started having a photographer interact and record what was happening, and I decided, hey, this needs to be a book. And so, it's a very high concept, a provocative idea, but when people read it, once again, it's 2 stories going on. It's a fantasy story of what's the aliens and why they're here, but it's that journey of being there with an artist in the middle of the night with his friend photographer, going on the streets, going to these, abandoned train tracks, and, waiting for the moment where the cops are going to be like, hey, get out of here.
Yeah. Which is very much akin to what the graffiti artist aesthetic is now. That it really is fashion street art. And I've never heard that term evoked before, so I'm going to claim it right here.
Yeah, exactly.
And by all means, use it and run with it. In a post-graffiti world, that is absolutely fashion street art, in the same way that knitting has become a type of street art. That this kind of guerrilla photography, heavily costumed, is a thing unto itself. I'm sure it will encourage copyists, and that's a good thing. Yeah. I think that needs to be happening in Minneapolis and in a lot of other places, and certainly in the South. But and hey, maybe even Baltimore. But that as this type of thing kind of gains momentum, you can always circle back to it. I mean, the danger of always being ahead of the curve is that it's a single idea, and that you were able to execute to the best of your ability, to the best that time had to offer, and then somebody else comes along and springs forward off of that and has a success that can't be replicated.
Right.
With the projects that I've seen you involved with, and especially with the costuming, but also, and now maybe more so than ever, the type of taxidermy work that you're doing, is that it's a constantly renewable idea. Not only are the costumes and materials that you're using, you're taking other stuff and doing a type of recycle so that is a reusable source, but the idea of how you're doing it can always be wheeled back upon. That there's a circle that doesn't close, it spirals, and you can take it in different places. And so when you talk about the Steampunk'd show, which is, by the time this podcast airs, will have ended.
Right.
And so I guess we can talk about things because
I want to go back to something that you did mention just now.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because my heart was pounding when you said the fact that, I'm ahead of my curve and then something else will come out, being inspired by that. What was driving me crazy when I was doing this publishing the illustrated stories is that people don't realize how long it takes from writing the story, getting it perfectly edited. By the way, people who publish themselves, do not edit your own work. Number one thing, do not edit your own work. Number two thing, do not let the illustrator design the book or have a look at the designs. Those are the two number one rules. But anyway, then you have the illustrator do their illustrations. By the time the books would come out, it would be like 2 years after the initial idea. Yep. And so I wrote these two under that pen name Winter. I wrote these two zombie stories where the whole basis is that it's a zombie point of view from the zombie who's a soul trapped in his body. And the whole thing is from the point of view from the zombie where it's like, he sees himself doing this stuff. That was the first book. And the second book was the idea that if the zombie is still alive, do they have their souls trapped in their bodies? And, is it a mercy killing, or can we keep them and, kind of use them as hard labor? That book is called Zombie Rock Band Must Be Destroyed. But it was so crazy because I wrote these things. No one had ever heard of these ideas. But by the time these books were being published, it was almost like I jumped on a bandwagon because there was that movie called Fido that came out that was about zombie slaves. And then there's that movie Warm Bodies that came out that was basically almost that same idea where it's a soul trapped in body. And it was so funny because I put these books out and people were like, I've seen this already. And it's like, if you only knew. So that's just one thing I wanted to touch upon. It's like when you think of these ideas, and not saying I was the original person, but I definitely wasn't the one, wasn't one to jump on the bandwagon. Right. Either we all had the same idea at the same time, or, it wasn't me getting the idea from these movies.
Yeah. We were just talking in the last show with Satine Phoenix about how it's unfair to blame the creator for what media does with their work once it's created too.
Right.
She was talking about reading a lot of the young adult fiction, and how a lot of these projects were projects that were out there that when one thing hit, there was then a rush for anything that was like it that could compete, and then that all of a sudden got turned into films to varying degrees of success or failure. But the reason that we know each other is through other art friends.
Right. And
then I saw your work and I said, why have you never shown this to me before? I would be showing you all along. And we started showing your creations, the kind of steampunk inspired taxidermy type pieces.
Right.
And lo and behold, here we are years later. And there's a TV show built around that very idea as a kind of game show.
That was so crazy. The weirdest thing is as I was watching Face Off with my friend Sig Neutron on season 7, I kept having these crazy realistic dreams every night where I was on my own reality show. And I would wake up thinking, wouldn't that be something? And then going, there's no such thing. How could that be? There would be no competition that would get what I do, the type of artwork that I do. That would be impossible. And it's almost a year later where I'm on this show called Steampunk'd. It's so crazy where the format is we are repurposing things. You are assemblage artists essentially, and you can either do steampunk fashion or steampunk leatherwork or steampunk sculpture, and we build a house from scratch. The challenges, each room is a fantasy-themed room that has a fantasy character that lives in it. We have to build the room, come up with the story, and build an outfit for the fantasy character. And I thought, wow, talk about all the things that I can do. It's like every little thing that I can do and do well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was really crazy. And the funny thing is I'm not by any means competitive. In fact, the games that I play that I do well at, if somebody is so upset that they're losing, I will often lose just so I don't have to see my friend being upset. That's how not competitive I am.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't have even applied to it if it weren't for all my friends. I kept getting emails from fans who were saying, have you seen this advertisement? They're looking for exactly you.
Yeah.
And I thought it was like a sign from the universe because I kept opening my email and seeing this, like, we're looking for, are you this person who makes this? We're looking for this. What's interesting is that advertisement was put out in February, and I didn't apply until April. And I was like, it's probably too late, but I'll apply. And they called me the next day and said, this is the last week of casting. And I was literally the last person cast.
Wow.
Talk about like it was meant to be, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It was strange.
When we were doing the biennial taxidermy show that we first partnered with Robert Marbury and the Minnesota Rogue Taxidermy Association, after year 2, which would have been, again, separated by a year, so you talk about the third year in, we were approached by a number of different productions that wanted to do taxidermy-based reality shows.
Oh, wow.
And one of the companies asked me if I wanted to be a judge, and then they kind of rated my list of artists, and then they moved forward without us, which is very typical, very typical. But we had also been approached as a gallery to be like a reality show, and so...
Wow, that would be awesome TV, though.
Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know. And my
all
response,
the characters with Billy and everything. Oh,
well, one of the things, and I talked to Billy about it, and he was like, "Well, it's like if they don't pay, they can't shoot." And I was like, "Well, my bigger worry than that is that there really isn't a lot of drama here, which means they're going to manufacture it,
right?"
And I don't want to be in a position to be made to look silly, and don't want Billy to be put in a position to look silly. And so we declined pretty quickly. I was like, I'm not really into this.
Right.
And I'm glad because I know how frustrating it has to be number one, your setup is a game show, so it's a contest.
Right.
So it's not even, you're not the constant. So that means unless, and with most reality shows, it seems to be that the squeaky wheel gets a lot of grease.
Oh, yeah.
That whoever the loudest person is going to get a lot of airtime. And so they'll manufacture problems, or they'll change the rules to suit your situation. And I'm not going to ask you about that specifically, but that knowing what your work is like and having sold a lot of it over the years and seeing the level of craft, and also having received submissions by several of the other contestants that appeared on that show who did not make it into any prior shows.
I love you for saying that.
It's the truth. It's the truth. That it's surprising and unsurprising, the outcome of the show. Right. That for for the drama of the build-up, that it would be easy to set you up as the person to beat, and then try and find a way to make that happen, to manufacture that defeat.
Yeah, it was so insane because I have to be really careful about what I say, but... because even though this will be aired when the show is over, the Game Show Network has been really, really picky about what we say.
Sure.
And I actually kind of gave them a very stern letter, because before I even made it public, because I was kind of lazy about telling people that I was on the show, because I had post-traumatic stress disorder, to be honest. I got a letter, kept getting this letter sent to me that I wouldn't sign for, because I won't sign for letters that I don't know where they're coming from. Right. And finally they called me up just recently and said, we're trying to send you a letter and you're not signing for it. And I said, okay, well, what is this letter? And they wouldn't tell me. Yeah. And then, so finally I'm like, okay, well, if it's really important, I'll sign for it. I signed for it, and it's a letter from July 20th, basically saying, I'm saying too much, or somebody might be saying too much or whatever. And I thought, well, that's kind of silly, because I had that is a time where I hadn't told anybody yet. Mm-hmm. Why are they sending me this letter? And, it's kind of like being treated like a baby. Right. It's like, you're sending me something I didn't even do, and it kind of makes me feel like, trust me, not like we're best friends and we need to be trusted, but treat me like an adult. So, but that letter did make me think, okay, I better be careful.
Yeah,
maybe that's why they sent me that letter, just to kind of like make sure I'm careful. But, that being said, it was strange because I went in there seeing people like Brian Poor's work and just the people that I've seen at the different galleries. I'm thinking, oh my God, who am I going to be up against? I'm so nervous, but I'm just going to try my best. And then when I'm on the show, I love the other contestants. They're all very good at what they do, but the level is very different.
Yeah,
and I'm not saying that I'm
Brian Poor, they're
right,
not Liz McGrath.
Exactly. And I'm not saying that I'm better than them as an artist, but I think that I've maybe had a lot more practice with time constraints. And so, whereas one person would be spending, the whole 3 days making one thing, like I would be putting out like a couple of things,
right? Which
I'm realizing now that I'm seeing the show that they're showing like 2 things that I made.
Right.
And I'm thinking, oh, it's because it would be a way too obvious that I know what I'm doing a little more, because they can't show me that in all these challenges I'm making like 10 things every challenge. When
it'd be
one
like
person's
Bruno
making
Mars being on American Idol.
Right, exactly. So, that was the frustrating thing. And when you're on a show like this, you feel crazy because you're so used to people. Art is subjective, so people might love it, might hate it, but no one can argue that you're good at what you do as far as skill. It's like that might not be my taste, but it's very well done.
Yeah.
But to be on a show where, I don't know if it's agenda-wise or what's happening, but, you do your best and you're like, wow, I'm pretty proud of this. And then to have, them compare me to something that somebody threw together or just not as good, and have them nitpick just because it's just better for the show or something, it makes you feel crazy because we can only judge our work based on what other people say. And when you're in a world where it's like, of what the majority says, so you're stuck in a place where the majority rules, and the majority who's ruling over you is, And you have an expectation of fairness, which is automatically out the door when there's a production. Right. Yeah. It's so crazy. One thing I do have to say is people kind of think, one, we're not under those real-time constraints. Yes, we are. In fact, if you guys want to be even more wild or mind-blown, we have less time than they say because you don't realize they're pulling us out for interviews. They're also, we have to stop and take a break, like we have to go to the bathroom or drink. They don't stop the time. They start the time when we get there, and it ends at the time they say it ends. So we have less time than you think. Yeah. And also the fact that they're creating drama, like kind of pitting us against each other, that kind of really didn't happen because I think that certain types of people were cast that they knew would be causing the drama on their own. Right. So I don't think there was there was no fake drama. I passed out in one episode. I did not fake pass out.
I know you've done that in the past. Where you've worked yourself up.
Thank you. Please vouch for me.
Passed out on the kitchen floor. Yeah.
It just so happens that I passed out on a bunch of fabric in the punk yard. There's something called a punk yard. It's a junkyard we grab from to turn into other things. Mm-hmm. And I didn't get any sleep, and I didn't eat anything, and we come in the next day and it's over 100 degrees. And I'm team captain, and I'm going into the punk yard, and I'm like feeling the heat beat on me, and my knees kind of start getting wobbly, and I go to kneel down because I feel like something's gonna happen. Yeah. And I fall over, and I happen to fall over on the fabric. Mm-hmm. But people have been emailing me saying, oh, that's so cute, you fake passed out. It's like, no, I did not fake pass out. It doesn't matter. Why would I do that when I have this time constraint and I'm the captain? So it's kind of interesting to see the people's reactions to this show. See, what I would expect more from a production is that something like that would have happened, and they would have saved that for 3 shows down the road. From what I know about the Osbournes and shows like that, quote unquote reality shows. But I think the best thing, obviously, that will come out of this is that people that didn't know who you were before are going to be like, how come that girl isn't on the front page of, this art magazine, or isn't constantly being covered by this, or and maybe you will be actually. Right. Maybe I will be. But that, it's like, how come I haven't heard of her before? And what can I find out that I don't know? And with you, it's kind of like, what you don't know. There's a lot you don't know, and good for you, because there's a lot of great stuff out there. So that this is going to obviously probably get you booked out for commission on
your clothing.
Thank you.
On the fine art stuff. But then also...
I'm already getting asked to do all kinds of conventions where they're featuring me and they're saying, we'll pay for the hotel. So, wow, it's awesome.
Featured guest.
Yeah.
Local celebrity.
Yay.
We love that. That's awesome. And then just... And also the ability to get into other more selective environments because you will have a certain cachet and the experience and the work that does speak for itself. People can look back and say, hey, well, she's been doing this for quite a while now. Look, there's this coverage out there. This exists. And look at the degree of improvement between this and this, but then look at all this other stuff.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of like, what if Prince was also, the president of the United States? It's like, this guy's pretty hardworking and pretty busy, but my God, he really just does one thing. And here you are doing 5 or 6 different things.
Thank you.
Still self-publishing.
Yes.
Still collaborating with a lot of other people to make great things happen. Still staying on top of the fine art stuff. Still producing great work in fine art shows. I'm still selling it. Other people are still selling it. And as I say, with each circle, as each Venn diagram crosses, you find another specialized thing that catapults you up into a higher area of recognition, and that's good stuff.
That means a lot. I mean, it was interesting because when I went on the show, at first they thought I just made things pretty because I'm a pretty girl. And then when they found out that I made mechanical moving sculptures, in the first episode, in the next couple of episodes, they had this girl where I said, me and the team captain decided I would make the art. And this girl who's a supposed fashion designer, she was like, why does Ave think she can suddenly make clothes? And it's like, really? I suddenly think I can make clothes? And that was the best part because it's exactly what you said. If you have any doubts, if you see in the show and anything's edited to kind of be wonky or maybe not showcase my skills to the best of what I can do, I love the fact that I have so many ways for people can see exactly what I do and for how long I've been doing it.
Yeah.
There's some people on the show who they're talkers, they're not doers, and they brag and brag and brag, and then you go online and you can't find anything that they've done. And so I'm just happy that I can just let my work speak for itself.
Excellent. Well, I think that's probably a pretty great place to leave off. And, we learned quite a bit about those early years of independent publishing. And we'll probably have a roundtable discussion in one of the upcoming shows with a lot of different people with different experiences as independent publishers and talk about where you find other talent, because a lot of people publish themselves like you also publish other people. And there's kind of an art form to that even.
Right.
But that we're obviously going to look for you at the not only at the San Diego Comic-Con, but at the other shows that you'll be doing. Quick shout out, give me some email or give me some web addresses for projects that you got going.
Okay, once again, I'll say it again, is averoseart.com. That's AVEROSEART.com. And there's coldslutsonfire.com. And
very exciting.
Those are good. Those are
very
good.
exciting.
There's one thing I do. Can I mention one more thing?
Absolutely.
Are we like running out of time?
No, go ahead.
Okay, one thing, funny story I had to tell you guys was the submissions, because you just mentioned that. And I was having people submit stories, but what I realized was not only submit stories, but submit art for, stories. And when I would reject them, they would go from being a hardcore fan to be a hardcore hater. And this is back in MySpace days.
Welcome to my world.
Yes. And so what I created was, since I was already creating characters, I created a character called Hector the Rejector. I put out an ad on Craigslist and said, are you weird, scary looking, or just uncomfortable to be around? Come hit me up. And I found the guy named Michael Schmidt, who's actually now been on several TV shows and everything as kind of like the weird chubby guy. He likes to flaunt it, so I'm not afraid to say that. And I took a bunch of pictures of him making weird faces with thumbs down, looking at people's manuscripts, and saying a whole little bio about him, saying, most likely, Hector Rejector, he's a mean guy, but I'm too busy doing other things. So most likely Hector Rejector will reject you, and I apologize ahead of time. But if you happen to get in, I'm more than happy to read your submissions. And it was cool because when he rejected people, it was reflected. People were going, why don't you get somebody else than Hector Rejector? But they were never mad at me anymore. It was the perfect thing. So
that should be an app. That should be an app that I can use for the 16,000 submissions I'm going to get for Lollapalooza this year. But yeah, so I'm glad I'm not alone, that other people are getting the same type of hate for rejection that I'm getting. Well, excellent. Again, thank you for listening. This has been Pod Sequentialism. I am your host, Matt Kennedy, and until next time, have a great week.
Bye.
Melt You, the school at Meltdown, where they teach you the skills to make comic books. Some of the current classes include creating comics, drawing comics for kids, and the art of inking. Coming soon, there will be classes for short film writing, drawing basics, and kids make zines. Go to meltcomics.com and enroll now.